You should think about moving out, Mom. We can't keep carrying you forever." The spoon in Agnes Rowland's hand slipped and struck the porcelain plate with a sharp, hollow sound. Her gaze lifted slowly, meeting the forced smile on her daughter's face, a smile cold and weary. "Carrying me?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Clara set down her glass of wine, avoiding her mother's eyes. "You know what I mean? Your medicine, hospital bills, electricity, everything. Mark and I are exhausted. This house is too big and you live here all alone. The care home in Burlington is excellent. I've already checked," Mark added quietly. "You'd have professional care there, Mom. Clara and I would feel at ease." Agnes said nothing. She simply looked at them long enough for Clara to grow uneasy. Outside, rain pattered softly against the window, its reflection dancing across the face of a mother being quietly erased from her own home. The mansion that had once echoed with laughter and piano music now felt cold and hollow. Agnes had lived there for over 30 years, building it from nothing with her late husband Harold. Every wall, every photo held a piece of their lives. When he passed away, she kept everything exactly as it was guarding it, like the soul of their family. Now her own daughter was asking her to leave it all behind. Clara's tone softened as if reason could make cruelty sound kind. "Don't be upset, Mom. I just want you to have better care. I have to think about Noah, about my own future." Agnes turned toward her grandson, a young man of 20, sitting silently with his head bowed. "Do you want me to leave?" she asked gently. Noah shook his head, his eyes red. "I don't want that, Grandma, but it's not up to me." Mark exhaled, his tone measured but cold. "Let's be practical, Mom. Things are hard. Clara just lost her biggest client and my business is struggling. We can't keep this up." Agnes nodded slowly. "Yes, when the storm comes, everyone runs to save their own dry ground." Her voice was calm, but her words struck like stones. "But it's strange, isn't it, to hear your own child call you a burden?" Silence filled the room. Mark stared down at the table. Clara looked away. Only the steady ticking of the wall clock broke the stillness. Agnes stood gathering the dishes with deliberate grace. The sound of running water masked the tremor in her voice. In the reflection on the kitchen window, she saw her own face aged thin but unbroken. "They think I'm weak," she thought. "Old, helpless, forgettable. But if they knew who I really am, they'd never dare to speak to me this way." When thunder rumbled outside, she wrapped her shawl around her shoulders and stepped onto the porch. The scent of wet maple leaves drifted through the air. Upstairs, the light in Clara's room glowed faintly, her and Mark's muffled voices rising and falling before fading into silence. Agnes knew they weren't regretting their words. They were afraid of losing what they believed would soon be theirs. Later that night, she sat alone in the living room holding a framed family photo. In it, Harold smiled warmly. Clara, just 10 years old, perched in her father's lap, her laughter frozen in time. "You promised you'd never leave me alone," Agnes whispered, her voice cracking. "And now that promise means nothing." The clock struck 11. Agnes opened a drawer and pulled out a brown envelope labeled Rowland Estate Confidential. Inside were legal documents, property deeds, company shares, and investment papers, all in her name. Not even Mark knew of their existence. When Harold died, she had quietly moved everything into a private trust to protect their legacy. That secret had been her shield and now her final source of power. A small, ironic smile touched her lips. "They think I live on pension checks and heart medication," she murmured. "They forget that I hold the keys to this house and far more." She locked the envelope inside a metal box and slipped a single sheet of paper beside it on which she wrote, "Tomorrow I begin my test. Let's see what their love is really worth." At dawn, Clara left for work. Mark followed soon after. Only Noah remained asleep on the sofa. Agnes watched him for a moment, her expression softening. In his face, she saw echoes of Harold kindness, honesty, the quiet strength of a man who believed in good. She brushed a strand of hair from the boy's forehead and whispered, "I don't need anyone's pity. I just need to know who truly cares." The morning sun poured through the window, casting a golden glow across her face. The despair that had once clouded her eyes was gone, replaced by calm determination. In this house, where everyone thought she was powerless, Agnes Rowland had just awakened with a plan, a test, worth more than money. Not a test of vengeance, but of love. And as it began, none of them knew that the woman they called a burden was in truth the one holding all the power. 3 weeks before that bitter dinner, Vermont was still drenched in spring sunlight. Back then, Agnes Rowland still believed that kindness was enough to keep her children close. That morning she sat by the window watching the lavender bloom in soft purple shades and listening to the sparrows perched on the wooden fence that Harold, her late husband, had once painted with his calloused hands. Harold had founded Rowland Woodworks, a successful lumber company. When he passed away, all assets were moved into a trust named the Rowland Trust, which would only reveal its heir upon Agnes's death. She had guarded that secret for 5 years, quietly managing everything to protect his legacy. Clara, her only daughter, now 33, once claimed she wanted nothing to do with the business, only to enjoy her father's peace. Agnes never objected. But ever since Clara married Mark, a charming financial advisor with too much ambition, the house had grown colder. Mark spoke only of investments and profits and treated Agnes as though she were an expense to be managed. One morning, a letter arrived, an official request for financial and mental competency evaluation filed under Mark's name. Agnes immediately understood. They wanted control of the Rowland Trust. She gave a quiet, knowing smile, folded the paper neatly, and brewed herself a pot of tea. "If they think I'm weak," she murmured, "then I'll show them what weakness really looks like." That afternoon, she received a call from her late husband's old lawyer, Mr. Whitman. "Someone asked about the Rowland Trust," he said. "I turned them away, but I doubt they'll stop there." "Let them look," Agnes replied calmly. "When greed grows too large, it exposes itself." That evening, Clara came by with a box of pastries and a rehearsed smile. "Mom, Mark only wants to help you organize your finances. You can't manage everything on your own forever." Agnes poured tea, her tone barely above a whisper. "My finances are fine." Clara's smile faltered. "I just want what's best for you." Agnes studied her daughter, remembering when those same eyes once looked at her with pure affection. "Thank you, Clara, but I can take care of myself." Clara forced a laugh and left her perfume lingering in the air, a scent that had grown foreign since she married Mark. As night fell, Agnes opened her laptop and logged into a hidden account named Harold's Echo. Rows of numbers glowed on the screen stocks, land deeds, investments, tens of millions in total. She could still hear Harold's voice. "Money doesn't change people. It only reveals who they already are." That was when Agnes decided to test her family. A small, simple experiment. She would pretend she needed money for her heart medication. If they still loved her, they would help without hesitation. 3 names were written neatly on a piece of paper: Clara, Mark, and Noah, her 20-year-old grandson studying in Boston. The next morning, she visited Mr. Whitman. "I'd like you to prepare a few documents for me," she said. He drafted 3 sets, 1 genuine, 1 backup, and 1 false. "What are you planning, Agnes?" he asked curiously. She smiled faintly. "A lesson in gratitude." That night, she walked through the quiet house. Moonlight spilled over the hallway, illuminating the family portrait that still hung above the stairs. Harold smiling warmly, young Clara at the piano beside him. The little girl who once played those melodies had long forgotten them and was now scheming to own the piano itself. When the clock struck 9, Agnes opened her notebook and wrote, "Tomorrow the test begins. If they truly care, they'll help. If not, I'll let the justice of money speak." 3 days later, she began. Agnes called Clara first saying her medical allowance had been cut and she needed a small amount to buy her medication. Clara hesitated for several seconds before replying, "I'm short on cash, Mom. Maybe ask Mark." When Agnes called Mark, he chuckled dryly. "You should sell the car or talk to the bank. We're already drowning in debt." Agnes kept her tone soft. "Thank you," she said, then hung up. That evening, she called Noah. "Sweetheart Grandma's having a little trouble affording her medicine," she said. His voice on the other end trembled. "How much do you need? I've saved a bit. I can come home if you want." Agnes closed her eyes, her hands trembling slightly. In that moment, she knew the test had already revealed its answer. The boy was the only one who still had a kind heart. Later that night, she opened the drawer, pulled out the forged documents labeled Roland Trust Copy, and placed them beside the others. The plan was in motion. From that moment on, the woman everyone dismissed as fragile reclaimed her true place, the one holding the fate of the entire family. Agnes Roland smiled, her eyes glinting like steel. This time she would make them learn that sometimes greed must be paid for with one's own blood. On Monday morning, the sky over Vermont was pale gray. A thin drizzle tapped softly against the window pane. Agnes Roland sat in the quiet kitchen, a cup of cold tea before her. Today was the day she would complete the test she had set for her own flesh and blood. She picked up her phone and looked at the 3 familiar names, Clara, Mark, and Noah. 3 people, 3 personalities, 3 truths. During the previous calls, Clara had made excuses Mark had refused outright, and only Noah had offered to send his savings and even return home to care for her. But one call wasn't enough. Agnes wanted to see their faces when tested, not just hear their voices. Around noon, she called Clara again. "I'm not feeling well, dear. Could you stop by?" Clara's voice came through the line, tired and detached. "I have a meeting today, Mom. Is it serious?" "No, I just wanted to talk. Maybe Mark can come instead. I'm too far away." "That's fine," Agnes replied quietly. At 2:00, Mark arrived wearing a black suit, red tie, and an expression as cold as if he were closing a deal. "You called for me," Agnes invited him in and poured tea. "I don't think I can afford my medication anymore," she said softly. Mark sipped the tea, wincing slightly at its bitterness. "You should review your expenses. I can help you set up a financial plan. If you transfer your assets to Clara's name, I can manage them for you. It'll be safer that way." Agnes looked at him steadily. "You mean I should hand over everything to your wife?" Mark leaned back, his lips curling into a faint smile. "We just want to help you, Mom. It's what family does." Agnes nodded slowly. Yes, family. After he left, she sat still, staring at the untouched cup of tea. In the reflection, her face was calm, but her eyes burned like slow embers. "You've chosen your path, Mark," she whispered. That evening, Noah called. "Grandma, I'm on my way home. I can't stop worrying." Agnes tried to dissuade him, but his tone was firm. "You always said that when someone needs you, don't hesitate. I'm just doing what you taught me." She paused, her throat tightening. "Come home, Noah. There's something I need your help with." The next morning, the doorbell rang. Noah stood there coat-soaked from his overnight bus ride. "Are you all right?" he asked, concerned. "I'm fine, dear. Just a little lonely." They had breakfast together, toast and orange marmalade. Noah told her about school, and she listened quietly. Then she asked, "If one day I had to leave this house, would you be sad?" Noah froze. Leave? Why? Because someone thinks I'm a burden. He met her gaze, his eyes unwavering. I'd stand with whoever truly cares, not whoever sounds reasonable. Agnes smiled faintly. Her heart felt lighter. Later that afternoon, Clara came home. She opened the door and saw Noah drying dishes. When did you get here last night? Why? Because Grandma called? You didn't come, so I did. The air grew heavy. Agnes sat in her chair, her tone composed. I invited you both to stay for dinner. We need to talk. The meal passed mostly in silence. Clara tried to keep her voice calm. Mom, Mark only wants to help. You're misunderstanding. Agnes looked straight at her. Help me or help yourselves. Don't think that way. We just want to make things manageable. And what if I told you the estate already has a chosen heir? Clara froze. What are you saying? Nothing, just a thought. Agnes said quietly, her eyes unreadable. People only care when you still have something to give. Clara's face flushed, but she forced a smile. I'm only thinking of you. Real kindness, Agnes replied softly, never comes with legal paperwork. After dinner, Clara left hastily, her expression torn between guilt and anger. When her car disappeared down the road, Noah whispered, Grandma, why don't you tell them the truth? Agnes looked out the window. Because they don't deserve to hear it yet. But you will when the time comes. That night, she opened her safe and took out 2 envelopes, one genuine, one fake. The real envelope contained the Rowland Trust documents. The fake was filled with blank copies. On the real one, she wrote a single line, for the one who understands the value of trust. She hid it beneath a loose floorboard and left the false one on her desk, placed perfectly where a curious eye might accidentally find it. When the clock struck 11, Agnes smoothed back her silver hair and exhaled slowly. Tomorrow Clara will return, she murmured. And when they do, everything will finally begin. Outside, the rain had stopped. The moonlight filtered through the window, casting a soft glow over her face. Gone was the gentle, yielding mother they thought they knew. What remained was a woman, calm, sharp, and quietly powerful, the one who held her family's fate in her hands. The next morning, Vermont softened after a night of rain. Pale sunlight spread across the damp porch. Agnes Rowland poured herself a cup of coffee, the bitter aroma filling the air. She knew Clara would come that day. Her daughter had never been one to sit still when she felt control slipping from her grasp. Around 10 o'clock, a silver car stopped at the gate. Clara walked in, her smile gentler than usual. Mom, I'm sorry for what I said yesterday. I just worry about you. Agnes took a sip of coffee, her tone calm. You're worried about me or about something else? Clara blinked. Mark just wants to help you manage your finances so you won't have to struggle. Agnes looked at her daughter, her eyes sharp and knowing. Do you think I'm living off my savings? Clara forced a smile. Well, you don't have an income anymore. Interesting, Agnes said quietly. You talk as if you've already seen my bank account. The air in the room grew heavy. Clara lowered her voice. Mark just doesn't want anyone taking advantage of you. Agnes smiled faintly. Anyone else or the two of you, Mom, that's not what I meant. I just want everything to be clear. Clear. Agnes stood up. Good. I like clarity. She went to her study and returned with a brown envelope, the fake copy of the Rowland Trust. If you really want to help start with this, Clara looked at the envelope, her pulse quickening. What is it, financial papers? You can take them home and discuss with Mark. You're giving this to me. Yes, Agnes replied evenly. But remember, not every test comes from outsiders. Clara left, clutching the envelope, her eyes flickering between ambition and fear. Watching her go, Agnes sighed softly. Now let's see how quickly greed travels. That afternoon, Noah came in to find his grandmother still seated at the table. "What are you thinking about, Grandma?" She smiled gently. "About the future and the lessons people only learn when it's too late." "Can I help?" he asked. "No, dear. Just watch." That evening, the phone rang. Mark's voice came through, eager and trembling. "Mother Clara showed me the documents. I had no idea you still controlled that much wealth. We should meet and plan some investments. Investments for whom Agnes asked. For all of us. Money shouldn't just sit there." "You're right," she said. "But it also shouldn't fall into the wrong hands." They agreed to meet the next day at Mark's office. The room was bright but cold, the air thick with cheap cologne. Clara sat beside her husband, smiling too politely. "We've prepared the contract," Mark said, sliding a stack of papers toward her. "Once you sign, everything will be simple." Agnes pulled out her glasses and read each line carefully. When she finished, she asked quietly, "If I sign this, what will I have left?" Clara answered quickly, "You'll still be part of the family, of course." Agnes nodded. Family, such a lovely word. But I wonder if Harold were still alive? What would he think? Clara hesitated. "He left you this house." "Not just that," Agnes replied with a soft smile. "He left me memory and clarity, two things you've just proven you don't have." Mark clenched his fists, his tone rising. "You've got it all wrong, Mother." "No, my son," she said calmly, her voice cool as ice. "I just wanted to see who among you could be kind without revealing your greed. Sadly, both of you failed." Clara froze. "What are you talking about?" Agnes rose from her chair. "The papers you took home were copies. The real ones are still with me." She placed her hand on her purse. "I gave you a test and you chose betrayal." Mark shot to his feet. "You can't play games like this." "That money belongs to the family." Agnes let out a quiet laugh. "Family protects one another. It doesn't prey on itself." She turned toward the door, her voice firm and unshaken. "When you finally understand that, I'll be ready to talk about money." Stepping outside, Agnes drew in a long breath. A light rain had begun to fall again, but it felt refreshing. Each drop that touched her skin seemed to wash away the years of being treated like a burden. On her way home, she thought of Noah, the one pure light left, the only person who measured love without profit. That evening, when she walked through the door, Noah was sitting by the window reading. He looked up and smiled. "You're home." "Yes," she said softly, her eyes gleaming. "And this is only the beginning." Outside, the wind began to rise again. Inside that small house, the old mother had reclaimed her place, the woman who held power in the quiet war between greed and blood. The next morning, Vermont glowed with soft light after the night's rain. Morning sun filtered through the mist, shining across the old photograph of Harold Roland hanging on the wall. Agnes stood before it, gazing at her husband's gentle smile. "You can rest easy now," she murmured. "Everything is finally returning to where it belongs." As she set the breakfast table, the sound of a car stopping at the gate broke the silence. Noah walked in, holding a bouquet of lavender. "Grandma, I bought these for you. It's still your favorite, isn't it?" Agnes smiled and placed the flowers into a glass vase. "Yes. Their scent makes me feel like Harold is still here." Noah hesitated. "Mom said you're really angry. She's worried." Agnes's tone was calm. Worried about me or about the envelope she took? Noah didn't answer. He didn't defend his mother, just sighed quietly. "Will you forgive her?" Agnes looked out toward the garden, her voice low. "Forgiveness is easy, but first one must understand what consequence means." She poured tea and continued softly. "When a mother has to pretend to be poor just to test her own children, it means trust is already dead." Noah said quietly, "Maybe Mom's being influenced by Mark." Agnes nodded slightly. "Perhaps. but people are only led by what they already want to believe. Mark is greedy and Clara is weak, and both are wrong. Around noon, the phone rang. Clara's trembling voice came through. "Mom, I was wrong yesterday. I didn't know the envelope was a copy." Agnes replied calmly, "Now you know. So what did you learn?" "Please don't be so cold with me. I'm just scared of losing everything." Agnes gave a faint laugh. "You've never had anything to lose, Clara. You only know how to take, not how to keep." Silence filled the line. After a pause, Clara spoke again. "Mark is furious. He says you're trying to humiliate us." "You don't need my help for that," Agnes said evenly. "You're managing well on your own. If Mark wants to come, let him." That afternoon, Mark did come. His crisp suit couldn't hide the tension in his face. "Mother, I think we should talk again. Yesterday was a misunderstanding." Agnes stood by the fireplace, the flames reflecting on her calm features. "A misunderstanding? You mean trying to have me declared incompetent so you could seize my assets?" Mark froze. "Who told you that? You did," she answered. "You forgot to turn off your microphone during that call. I may be old, but I'm not deaf." He forced a weak laugh. "I was only joking. A joke." "Plotting how to legally steal from family is your idea of humor," she said, stepping closer, her tone sharp. "Don't mistake someone's trust for a game." Mark's voice cracked. "I was wrong. I only wanted to make sure Clara had a good life." Agnes turned toward the window, her voice cool. "Who are you helping, Mark? You're only helping yourself. To you, I'm nothing more than a walking wallet." The air thickened with tension. He spoke quietly. "If you want, I'll step away from all of this." "No need," she said. "It's already decided. The Rowland Trust will be managed by Noah from now on. You and Clara won't touch a cent." Mark went pale. "You can't do that." "I can," she interrupted, "because everything still bears my name." He gritted his teeth. "You'll regret this. Clara will fall apart." "You should worry about yourself." Agnes replied, her voice steady. "I've already sent the recording of your meeting to my lawyer." Mark's face drained of color as he staggered toward the door. "You're destroying this family." Agnes watched him leave, her tone calm and unwavering. "No, I'm cleaning it." Noah stepped out from the next room. "You really did it, didn't you?" Agnes sat down, her hands resting on her teacup. "Yes, I want you to understand money isn't evil, but it reveals who people truly are." Noah gently took her hand. "If Grandpa were here, he'd be proud of you." Agnes smiled faintly. "He used to say kindness means nothing without wisdom. I finally understand that." That night, Clara sent a message. "Mom, please don't make things harder for Mark. He's panicking." Agnes didn't respond. Instead, she opened her notebook and wrote, "Today, my son-in-law has fallen and my daughter is losing her soul." Outside, the wind rose again. Moonlight spilled through the window, brushing across her composed face. Agnes whispered softly, "From now on, everything will change. Not for money, but for justice." Noah looked at her, his eyes filled with both admiration and sorrow. In that quiet night, he understood the true storm within the Rowland family had only just begun. The next morning, Vermont lay under a thin veil of mist. Faint sunlight filtered through the golden maple leaves spilling across the window where Agnes Rowland sat with a warm cup of tea. The house was unusually quiet, no ringing phone, no footsteps beyond the gate. Only Noah remained the one grandchild who still stayed by her side, quietly repairing the leaky porch roof. Agnes watched him, her voice soft and steady. "Few young people these days have your patience." Noah smiled. "You taught me that, Grandma. You said if you want to keep something, you have to build it yourself." "That's true," she replied, "but sometimes hands aren't enough. You have to use your mind." She looked out toward the garden where dry leaves drifted in the wind. Clara won't stop. When people are exposed, they don't repent, they retaliate. Noah frowned. You think Mom will come back? She'll try her last trick, crying, begging, pretending to regret. And when I soften, she'll strike the final blow. Not long after the doorbell rang, Clara stood outside, her face, pale eyes swollen from tears. Mom, I just want to talk. Agnes invited her in and poured tea. Drink this. The rain out there is cold. Clara's voice trembled. Mark lost his job. Everyone's turned against us. I know I was wrong. Please forgive me. Agnes stared out the window, her tone calm. Forgiveness is easy, but rebuilding trust isn't. Were you forced into this, or did you choose it? Clara lowered her head. I was afraid Mark would leave me. Agnes gave a faint smile. If someone makes you betray your own mother, losing them isn't tragedy, it's freedom. Clara broke down in tears. Mom, I truly regret everything. Agnes set down her cup. Do you regret losing money or losing your mother? The question froze Clara in place. Agnes rose and opened the cabinet, pulling out a real envelope. Do you know how much the Rowland Trust is worth? Clara shook her head. $78 million, Agnes said slowly. Your father built it to secure your future. But now I'm transferring it to Noah, the only one who still understands integrity. Clara's eyes widened. You're giving it all to him. Not all, Agnes replied. I'm keeping the portion your father wanted to create a scholarship fund in his name. Clara sobbed. Please, Mom, I'll lose everything. Agnes smiled faintly. No, you're just giving back what was never yours to begin with. Just then Noah entered. He froze when he saw his mother kneeling at Agnes's feet. Mom Clara's voice broke. Noah, please talk to your grandmother. I just want to keep the family together. Noah looked between them, then said quietly, Mom, I love you, but I know who's really holding this family together. Agnes placed her hand gently on his shoulder. You don't need to say more, dear. People only change when they truly want to. Clara wiped her tears, her voice trembling. Are you really cutting me off? Agnes looked at her eyes filled with both sorrow and resolve. No, I just want you to understand that when trust is gone, family is only an empty word. Clara's lips quivered. You've chosen Noah. One day he'll betray you too. Agnes spoke softly. If that happens, at least it'll be by someone who never pretended to love me. Clara said nothing more. Her footsteps echoed sharply against the wooden floor as she left. When the door closed, silence settled over the house. Noah sat beside his grandmother. Are you all right? He asked. Agnes smiled faintly. I am. Sometimes to save a family, you have to let it break first. Noah took her hand gently. I just don't want you to be lonely. Agnes looked out at the light drizzle. Loneliness isn't frightening. Living among people who only see money, that's the real hell. She stood and took a small key from her pocket, placing it in Noah's hand. Keep this. It's the key to my safe. One day, when you understand the true worth of honesty, you'll know what to do with it. Noah gripped the key tightly. You trust me that much. Agnes nodded firmly. Not because you're perfect, but because you're not greedy. Outside, the sky darkened as lightning flickered and vanished. Agnes turned to Noah, her voice low but steady like a final reminder. The storm is coming, but after it, the sky will clear. Today we start again, not with money, but with trust. Noah nodded, his gaze unwavering. Inside the small house, lit by the soft glow of the fireplace, 2 generations sat side by side, one who had lost everything to keep her honor, and one learning how to protect it. 3 days had passed since Clara left the house. Vermont was wrapped in a bitter autumn chill. Crimson leaves swirled across the porch like restless memories refusing to sleep. Every morning, Agnes Rowland still rose early, brewed her tea, and sat by the window, her calm posture betraying nothing of the storm that had passed. Yet in her eyes lingered a quiet sorrow, the sorrow of a mother who had come to understand that love alone was sometimes not enough to keep a family whole. Noah was in the study reviewing the documents she had entrusted to him. Agnes entered holding an old wooden box. "Noah, do you know what's inside this?" He looked up. "Grandpa Harold's letters." She smiled softly. "Yes, the letters he wrote to me during his final year. There's one that was never opened. Today, I want to read it with you." They sat together. Agnes carefully unsealed the envelope. The paper yellowed, the faint scent of ink still clinging to it. The letter began in Harold's trembling yet deliberate handwriting. "To Agnes, if you're reading this, I'm likely gone. But I trust you will remain strong. If one day our children forget what love means, use your wisdom to teach them not your tears." Agnes read slowly, her voice breaking. Noah sat in silence, listening to every word as though hearing a will. At the end, Harold had written, "Money is only a test. Whoever passes it will be worthy of the Rowland name." Agnes folded the letter, a tear falling onto the page. He was right, Noah. They failed that test. He took her hand gently. "But you didn't fail Grandma. You're doing exactly what he wanted." Around noon, Clara arrived unexpectedly. Gone were her elegant clothes. She wore an old coat, her face drawn and tired. "Mom, I need to talk." Noah stood, but Agnes gestured for him to stay. "Go ahead, I'm listening." Clara's voice trembled. "Mark left me. He sold everything and fled to Canada. I have nothing left." Agnes remained calm. "Now you finally understand what loss feels like." Clara fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. "Mom, I'm not asking for money. I just want to come home. I'm scared." For a moment, Agnes saw the little girl Clara used to be, the one who feared the dark and always ran to her mother whenever thunder struck. After a long silence, she said softly, "Stand up, Clara. The rain isn't frightening anymore. Only hearts can be cold." Noah quietly stepped out, leaving the two women alone. "I once believed you would be good," Agnes said, "but you let greed blind you. If you want to come back, I have one condition." Clara wiped her tears. "Anything. You must work. Earn every dollar yourself. Here I don't keep anyone alive with pity." Clara nodded, determination flickering through her weary eyes. "I accept. I just want to start over." That afternoon, Agnes called Mr. Whitman and asked him to arrange a bookkeeping job for Clara at the Rowland Foundation office. "I want her to learn that no one is born with privilege." Whitman agreed. "Do you really think she'll change?" Agnes smiled faintly. "I believe in lessons that cost dearly." On her first day, Clara took the bus to work. Watching her daughter in a simple uniform, Agnes felt both pride and sorrow. When Clara bowed politely to the guard, she knew the girl had finally come down to earth after years of floating above it. That evening, Noah asked Grandma, "Aren't you afraid Mom will betray you again?" Agnes shook her head. "No. Once someone has tasted enough bitterness, they no longer find sweetness in deceit." A week later, Clara began submitting detailed, organized financial reports. In meetings, she stayed quiet, listening more than she spoke. Others thought she was subdued, but Agnes knew it was the first sign of someone relearning how to be decent. One night, Clara knocked on her door, holding a stack of papers. "Mom, I want to redo my old agreement, transfer my inheritance into the Harold Rowland Scholarship Fund." Agnes looked at her eyes glistening. "Are you sure?" Clara nodded. "I don't deserve the money Dad left, but I can honor his memory." Agnes pulled her daughter into an embrace, the first in many years. You finally understand. The true inheritance isn't money, Clara whispered through tears. I know now, Mom. The richest person is the one who is still trusted. When Clara left the room, Noah entered, noticing the gentle smile on his grandmother's face. What happened, Grandma? Nothing. Agnes said softly, just a small miracle born from remorse. She looked out toward the garden where dew had gathered on the lavender leaves. In the sweet fragrance, she could almost hear Harold's voice whispering, You've done well, Agnes. And in that peaceful evening, for the first time in years, the old mother felt true serenity. Not because the money was safe, but because family had finally regained its true worth. A month had passed since Clara returned to work at the Rowland Foundation. Autumn in Vermont was drawing to a close, the wind carried a sharp chill, and maple leaves blanketed the path outside. In the upstairs study, Agnes Rowland sat at her wooden desk, carefully reviewing the report Clara had submitted. The lines were neat, the numbers precise, not a single error in sight. A faint smile touched her lips, the rare kind that had not appeared since the storm of the past months. A knock sounded at the door. Clara entered, holding another folder. Mom, this is the monthly summary. I double-checked everything. Agnes looked up, her expression gentle. Well done. I didn't expect you to be this meticulous. Clara smiled softly. When someone has lost everything, they learn to value every number. Agnes nodded. Are you angry with me? Clara shook her head. No, I'm angry with myself. I used to think money meant safety until it became my prison. Agnes replied quietly. Your father once said money is a test, and you learned that truth the hardest way possible. That afternoon, Noah came home holding a file. Grandma Mr. Whitman said the expansion plan for the scholarship program has been approved. This year, at least 20 students will receive funding. Agnes smiled warmly. Then your grandfather's dream has finally come true. Clara's voice trembled slightly. I never thought helping others could bring such peace. That evening, the three of them sat around the table. Dinner was simple pumpkin soup bread and hot tea. In the soft glow of the lamp, no one spoke of the past, yet the calm in their eyes spoke volumes. Agnes looked at the 2 generations before her, feeling her heart lighten. She knew she had passed through the darkest part of her life and rediscovered something far more precious than wealth trust. But peace did not last long. The next night, the phone rang. Agnes picked it up, and a deep, cold male voice spoke. Mrs. Rowland, this is Carter Mark's former associate. He's in Montreal and preparing to file a lawsuit for inheritance rights. He claims you've illegally seized his assets. Agnes gripped the phone tightly. Thank you, but the law and the truth always stand on the same side. Carter replied slowly, Mark doesn't give up easily. You should be ready. After hanging up, Agnes sat still for a long moment. Clara entered and saw her mother deep in thought. What happened? She asked. Agnes looked at her calmly. Mark plans to return, but this time we won't let him hurt anyone again. The next morning, Attorney Whitman arrived, setting a thick file on the table. If Mark sues, we have enough evidence to dismiss his claims. Clara lowered her head. I'm sorry for letting things get this far. Agnes placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder. It's all right. Now face it like a true Rowland. That afternoon, Clara received a call from Mark. His voice was as smooth as ever. Do you really think your mother can hide the money forever? I'll get what's mine. Clara's tone was steady. You don't have anything left, Mark. You lost it the moment you betrayed our trust. You think you're innocent? I have enough proof to ruin your mother. Clara tightened her grip on the phone, her voice unwavering. If threats are all you have, go ahead. But this time, my mother isn't alone. She hung up and exhaled deeply. For the first time, she felt truly free. The fear inside her had died with her old ambitions. That night, Agnes sat by the fireplace, Noah beside her and Clara across from her. The firelight flickered across their faces, 3 generations, 3 stages of faith. Agnes spoke softly. Mark may come back, but we have something he doesn't honor. People can buy everything except trust. Clara nodded slowly. If he really returns, I won't run. I'll protect this foundation the way I would protect my father's legacy. Agnes looked at her daughter, a gentle smile forming on her lips. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. Noah sat in silence, observing the 2 women. He realized this was no longer a story about money, but about redemption and inheritance of values. He saw it clearly in their eyes, one woman who had learned forgiveness and another who had learned how to stand tall again. Outside, the season's first snow began to fall. Soft flakes clung to the window pane, reflecting the glow of the fire. Agnes whispered, "Snow covers everything in white, but only those who live righteously leave footprints that remain clear." The 3 of them sat together in silence. No resentment, no calculations, only stillness and the warmth of forgiveness. For the first time in many years, Agnes Rowland felt true peace, not because her fortune was safe, but because her family had finally been restored. 2 weeks later, Vermont lay buried under a blanket of white. The wind howled through the bare maple trees and snow piled high on the porch. Inside, Agnes Rowland sat in her study beside the glowing fireplace. On her desk rested a thick envelope, a court summons. Plaintiff Mark Ellison. She read every line slowly, not with anger or fear, but with calm acceptance. The moment she had anticipated had finally arrived. Noah entered, his expression darkening as he saw the envelope. "He actually sued you," Grandma Agnes nodded. "I've been ready for this day for a long time. Now we'll let the truth speak for itself." Clara appeared at the door, her eyes red. "Mom, I should have stopped him before it came to this." Agnes shook her head. "No, Clara. This is your chance to show you're not like him." On the morning of the trial, snow blanketed the streets of Burlington. Reporters crowded outside the courthouse, calling it the Rowland Inheritance Battle. Agnes stepped out of the car in her gray wool coat, walking slowly but steadily. Camera flashes flickered around her, but she remained composed, as if she had only come to end an old play. Inside the courtroom, Mark sat across from her, his face thin and pale, his eyes still filled with arrogance. When he saw her, he sneered. "Mother, all this over a bit of money. You dragged your whole family into court." Agnes replied calmly, "If this is the price for protecting the truth, I am willing to pay it." Mark's lawyer began reading the accusations, his voice flat. Agnes was accused of taking advantage of her daughter's and son-in-law's psychological instability to seize their inheritance. Clara bowed her head, tears falling silently. When her turn came, Agnes stood up. Her voice was low but firm, resonating clearly through the courtroom. "I stole nothing. I simply kept the promise I made to my husband to protect what he built from greed. I am not weak, only weary from watching my own children turn into strangers." She opened her bag and placed a small USB drive on the table. "This is a recording of the family meeting from 4 months ago." The sound played through the speakers, Mark's voice sharp and unmistakable. "If we can have her declared mentally unfit, everything will belong to us." The courtroom fell completely silent. Mark's face turned pale as his lawyer scrambled to intervene, but it was too late. Clara broke into tears. "He's telling the truth, Your Honor. I heard him say those exact words." Mark turned to her furiously. "You're betraying me." Clara wiped her tears. "No. I'm standing on the side, that's right." The judge's gavel struck. The court dismissed the case and ordered Mark to pay all legal fees. Agnes exhaled softly, a faint smile crossing her lips. Clara wept into her hands while Mark lowered his head, his eyes empty. As they left the courthouse, reporters swarmed. One shouted, "Mrs. Rowland, do you feel triumphant after winning the case?" Agnes stopped and replied softly, "No. In a family, there are no winners, only those who learn to stop before they lose everything." That evening, the house glowed with warm light once more. Noah prepared dinner while Clara brewed tea. Outside, the snow continued to fall, but inside, the air was filled with warmth. Sitting by the fire, Agnes spoke quietly. "I'm not happy because I won. I'm simply relieved that justice still exists." Clara approached, taking her mother's hand. "I want to stay here, Mom. I want to help you run Father's foundation." Agnes nodded. "That's the best way you can make things right." A few days later, Attorney Whitman visited, placing a new file on the table. "Mrs. Rowland, I've completed the paperwork. The Rowland Foundation is now fully independent with Clara and Noah on the Board of Trustees." Agnes looked at them both, pride shining in her eyes. Then Harold's wish has finally come true. Late that afternoon, Clara visited her father's grave and placed a bouquet of lavender on the snow. "Dad," she whispered, "I once disappointed Mom, but I won't let the Rowland name be tarnished again." That night, as the wind howled outside, Agnes sat at her desk and opened her small journal. She wrote, "Today justice prevailed, but what brings me peace is seeing hearts rediscover the light." She closed the book and looked out the window at the drifting snow. In the kitchen, Noah and Clara were setting the table, laughing softly. The glow of the fire flickered across the walls, warm and serene. Agnes smiled and whispered, "Harold, do you see our family is whole again?" Outside, church bells rang through the snowy night. Inside the little house, 3 generations of the Rowland family sat together, no longer speaking of money, only sharing stories of trust and love. After everything, Agnes Rowland finally understood that the greatest treasure in her life was not locked inside a safe, but lived in the hearts of those who had learned how to love the right way. That winter in Vermont was colder than any before. The Rowland garden lay buried under snow where lavender once bloomed in bright summer light. Agnes Rowland stood by the window holding a cup of hot tea, watching the snow fall as if it were washing away the remnants of every mistake. She thought the storm had passed, but peace, she knew, was never meant to last. One morning, Noah rushed into her study holding an unmarked envelope. "Grandma, someone sent this." Agnes opened it. Inside was a photograph of her and Clara at the courthouse, along with a hastily written note, "The game isn't over. The fortune will still be mine." Noah clenched his jaw. "Grandma, let me call the police." Agnes only smiled faintly. "No need. When a man is desperate, he exposes his own weakness." 2 days later, Clara received an anonymous email with forged documents bearing the Rowland Foundation seal, implying that the charity was laundering money. Her hands trembled. "Mom, he's trying to destroy Father's reputation." Agnes placed a steady hand on her daughter's shoulder. "Don't be afraid. The truth remains our strongest weapon." She called Attorney Whitman to the house. After reviewing the files, he said, "If we stay silent, rumors will spread. You should release all financial records publicly." Clara hesitated. "What if he has more to use against us? The more transparent we are, the less he can hide." Agnes replied calmly, "Darkness always fears the light." 3 days later, the Burlington City Hall auditorium was filled with reporters. Agnes appeared in a black wool coat, her movements slow but commanding. Behind her stood Clara and Noah. She began, her voice clear and steady. "I am not here to defend myself, but to prove the truth. The Rowland Foundation exists to serve those in need, not to benefit my family." She held up a folder. "These are the full bank statements and independent audit reports. I invite you all to review them." Camera flashes filled the room as Whitman handed out copies to the press. Clara looked at her mother, admiration flooding her heart. Noah whispered, "She's winning with the truth." That afternoon, headlines spread across town, "Rowland Foundation, proven clean rumors collapse." People praised the woman who had faced deceit with integrity. Agnes read the news briefly, then set her phone aside. She did not need applause, only silence after the storm. But that night, Clara received an anonymous call. A rough male voice rasped through the line. "You think exposing me is enough? I still have something that will make that righteous mother of yours bow her head." Then came a chilling laugh before the line went dead. Clara froze. "It's Mark." When Agnes heard, she only sighed. When a man has nothing left, fear becomes his last refuge. But we are not afraid anymore. 2 weeks later, the police called. Mark had been arrested at the border for fraud and document forgery. The news spread quickly, and the papers spoke of the courageous woman who defeated greed with wisdom. That afternoon, Clara received another call from the authorities. "He wants to see you before extradition." Agnes agreed. In the cold interrogation room, Mark sat, slumped, his hair unkempt, his voice hoarse. "You won," he muttered. "Are you happy now?" Agnes looked at him, her tone calm but heavy. "No, Mark. No one is happy watching family fall to greed." He gave a bitter smile. "I just wanted back what was mine." "What you lost," she said softly, "was your conscience, and no one can redeem that for you." He was silent for a long moment, eyes red. "You'll still hate me, won't you?" Agnes shook her head. "No, I don't hate you. I just grieve for what you could have been." As they left the station, Clara asked quietly, "You still care about him, don't you?" Agnes replied, "Caring isn't the same as condoning. Forgiveness is for peace in our hearts, not for someone else's comfort." That evening, the house glowed once more. Clara poured tea. Noah tended the fire, and Agnes sat beside the hearth, her voice soft and steady. "Today we didn't defeat anyone. We only defeated ourselves, our fear and resentment." Noah smiled. "Grandma, I think Grandpa Harold would be proud of you." Agnes smiled faintly, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "He once said justice doesn't need noise, only a straight heart." Outside, the snow had stopped. Moonlight blanketed the white garden like a quiet blessing. Inside the small house, 3 generations of the Rowland family sat together, not speaking of money, but sharing stories of trust and kindness, the kind of inheritance no one could ever steal. Spring returned to Vermont. The snow melted slowly, revealing patches of fresh green grass in the Rowland garden. The wind carried the scent of newly planted lavender, mingling with the smell of damp soil and the chirping of birds coming home. Agnes Rowland sat on the porch, wrapped in a light shawl, her eyes glowing with a rare, serene peace. Since the ordeal with Mark life had quieted calm, like a lake after a storm. Clara stepped outside carrying 2 cups of tea. Mom, the scholarship fund just received 3 new applications. 1 student wants to study architecture, the other 2 are going into nursing. Agnes smiled, taking a sip of tea. "Those are good choices. They all help rebuild lives just as we've rebuilt our own." Clara looked at her mother, her eyes full of admiration and gratitude. "I still don't understand how you stayed so calm when everything was falling apart." Agnes replied softly, "When you've lost everything, you stop fearing loss. And when you have no fear, no one can break you." Noah came in from the garden holding a folder. Grandma, the University of Vermont, sent a letter of thanks. They've named the scholarship program the Harold Rowland Trust. Agnes paused, her eyes glistening. He deserves to be remembered that way, not for his wealth, but for his integrity. Clara took her mother's hand, and because of the woman who protected that legacy. That afternoon, the three attended the dedication ceremony for the scholarship program at the University of Vermont. The hall was simple and elegant. A polished bronze plaque read, "In memory of Harold and Agnes Rowland, for those who believe in second chances." Agnes stood quietly looking at it. A young student approached, handing her a bouquet of lavender. "Mrs. Rowland, because of your scholarship, I can stay in medical school." Agnes took the flowers, her voice trembling slightly. "You don't need to thank me, dear. Just do good and thank yourself." During the ceremony, Clara was invited to speak. Looking around at the hopeful young faces, she said, "I was once someone who lost faith, but my mother taught me that it's never too late to start again." The applause that followed was gentle but heartfelt. Agnes watched her daughter, pride swelling in her chest. Back home, she sat at her desk and opened her old leather journal. On the first page was Harold's handwriting. "If you are reading this, it means you've made it through." She smiled softly and added a new line beneath it. "And I have Harold." But it wasn't just me. It was our daughter and grandson, too. That evening, Noah sat in the living room strumming his guitar, the melody soft and light as breath. Clara poured more tea and set a cup beside her mother. "Mom, I've been thinking maybe we should expand the foundation to Maine. There are so many students there who need help." Agnes nodded. "If you're ready, then do it. From now on, I want you to lead the project. I'll step back and watch you continue." Clara was startled. "You want to retire, not retire," Agnes smiled. "Just pass the torch. Every generation must write its own chapter." Noah stopped playing and looked up. "What about me?" Grandma Agnes turned to him, her gaze warm. "You'll fulfill your grandfather's dream, taking the scholarship program beyond America. I've spoken to Whitman. The foundation can expand into Canada next year." Noah's eyes widened. "Really, you think I can handle it?" "I don't just think so," she said gently. "I know it." That night, the spring breeze drifted softly through the open window. Agnes watched the two of them laughing together and felt a deep calm settle in her heart. She knew it was time not to carry the burden, but to pass on the flame. But the next morning when she woke, she felt weaker than usual. Clara quickly took her to the doctor. The physician smiled reassuringly. "It's just low blood pressure. She needs rest." On the way home, Agnes said quietly, "Maybe my body is telling me it's time to slow down." Clara squeezed her hand. "Don't say that, Mom. I'm not ready for you to stop." Agnes smiled faintly. "You don't need to be ready. Life never waits for readiness. What matters is knowing how to move forward." That evening, she sat at her desk and wrote a letter to Noah. "If one day I am no longer here, don't let the foundation become just money. Let it be opportunity, let it be faith. I was never afraid of losing everything, only afraid that you'd forget why we began." She didn't send the letter. Instead, she folded it neatly and placed it in the wooden box where she kept Harold's old letters. Outside, a light spring rain fell, raindrops glistening on the window pane, reflecting her aged but luminous face. Agnes whispered softly, as if speaking to herself, "As long as goodness remains in the human heart, a legacy never truly dies." Inside the warm little house, Clara and Noah chatted cheerfully, and Agnes, who had weathered a lifetime of storms, smiled under the golden glow of the lamp, knowing that from now on their story would no longer be about greed, but about the quiet continuation of kindness. It was the last morning of April, and Vermont awakened in golden sunlight. The first lavender blooms had begun to blossom along the wooden fence, soft and fragrant. Agnes Rowland sat on her old wicker chair on the porch, a blanket draped over her legs. Clara brought out 2 cups of tea, the faint scent of ginger drifting into the breeze. I just received a thank you letter from a student in Maine, Clara said. He got one of our scholarships and wrote that one day he hopes to come back and help others the way you have. Agnes smiled gently, pride glimmering in her tired but kind eyes. That is the real reward, she said. Money only lasts for a while, but kindness endures forever. Noah came out from the house holding a newspaper. Grandma, the local paper, wrote about the foundation. They called you the woman who rose from ashes. Agnes chuckled softly. A bit dramatic, perhaps, but maybe there's some truth in it. I once fell hard, but I learned how to stand again without anyone lifting me up. Clara sat beside her mother. Mom, do you ever regret it? That you had to use pain to teach us such costly lessons? Agnes was silent for a moment, then said quietly, No. It broke my heart. Yes. But regret never. Because without those falls, you would never have learned how to rise on your own. That afternoon, Agnes called Clara and Noah into her study. 3 sealed envelopes lay on the desk. I want to set everything in order before I step down, she said. Clara frowned. Step down. What do you mean? Mom Agnes smiled. I can't run this foundation forever. My health isn't what it used to be. It's time for someone new to lead. She handed 2 envelopes to Clara and Noah. These contain the management rights and the remaining inheritance. From now on, all decisions about the foundation will be yours. Clara's eyes filled with tears. Mom, I'm afraid I'll make mistakes. That's all right, Agnes said softly. Mistakes aren't what you should fear. What matters is having the courage to own them. Noah looked at the remaining envelope. And what about the 3rd one? Agnes smiled wistfully. That one's mine. It's a letter I wrote to your grandfather years ago. Only now am I calm enough to read it again. She opened the envelope and unfolded the yellowed paper. Her voice trembled as she read, Harold, I've done my best to protect what we built. I've been angry. I've been tired. But I kept going because of my promise to you. If we ever meet again, I just want you to know I never gave up. No one spoke. Only the sound of the wind rustling the curtains filled the room, sunlight spilling gently across her peaceful, aged face. That evening, Clara suggested they dine in the garden. They set a wooden table among the rows of blooming lavender and lit a few small candles. Dinner was simple: chicken soup, toasted bread, and lemon tea. I remember when you used to work at that little diner, Clara said, smiling. You told me that as long as someone was willing to sit and eat with you, that was happiness. Agnes laughed softly. Because meals don't need to be fancy. They just need to be warm. When the sky darkened, Noah played a video on his phone, a recording of the Scholarship Foundation's new branch opening in Canada. The sign reading, Harold and Agnes Rowland, International Trust. Clara turned to her mother, her eyes glistening. Mom-Dad's dream has gone beyond borders. Agnes nodded, her voice choked with emotion. You two have finished what he couldn't. Now I can rest easy. Late that night, after everyone had gone to bed, Agnes remained on the porch. The spring wind was soft, carrying the sweet scent of lavender. She opened her old notebook and wrote one last line. Tomorrow I pass on the lamp, but its light will never fade, for faith has found its next keepers. A moment later, Clara came out wrapping a scarf around her mother's shoulders. Mom, it's cold. Agnes smiled gently. Do you know why I chose lavender Clara? Because it grows in every season just like kindness. No matter how it's trampled, it always blooms again. Clara took her mother's hand. I promise I'll hold on to that. Agnes nodded, her eyes glimmering in the candlelight. Remember, our true legacy doesn't live in a bank account. It lives in how you treat others. Before going to bed, Agnes stopped by her bedroom window, looking out at the moonlit garden. The sound of Noah's laughter and Clara's voice echoed faintly through the night. She closed her eyes and smiled. In that moment, the woman who had once battled greed and risen from ruin finally found what she had been searching for all her life, peace. The next morning, Vermont glowed under the sunlight that followed a night of rain. Rays of gold streamed through the window, falling softly upon an old photograph of Harold Rowland. Agnes sat up in bed, wrapped in a wool shawl, gazing at the lavender garden outside, where the purple blossoms swayed gently in the breeze. The faint scent of ginger tea filled the room, mingling with the chirping of early birds. Clara entered carrying a tray of oatmeal. "Mom, I made it just the way you used to make it for me when I was little." Agnes smiled, taking small spoonfuls. "This flavor takes me back." Clara sat beside her gently, holding her mother's hand. "I never forgot, Mom. Every time I made mistakes, I thought of you, the one who stayed when everyone else wanted to leave." Agnes replied softly, "That's what mothers do. Forgiveness isn't weakness. It's teaching others how to find themselves again." Noah walked in, carrying a small pot of lavender. "Grandma." "I planted a few more by the porch. Would you like to come see Agnes?" Nodded. "Of course. I wouldn't want to miss the first blooms of the season." Noah helped her to the porch. Sunlight poured over the garden, painting the world in shades of violet as the fragrance floated through the wind. Agnes breathed deeply and closed her eyes. Harold used to say beauty grows out of loss as long as we keep planting seeds. Clara smiled faintly. "And you've proven him right." Agnes shook her head gently. "No, my dear, you both did." They sat together reminiscing about old days, how she and Harold worked in a small diner, how during the harshest winters they would share the last cup of coffee between them. Tears welled in Clara's eyes. "You endured so much, Mom." Agnes shook her head. "If not for hardship, you'd never learn what strength feels like." That afternoon, the doctor came by. After checking her blood pressure, he said gently, "You need more rest, Mrs. Rowland. Your body is tired." Agnes smiled faintly. "I know, but there's still one thing left to do." She asked Noah to bring her the old brown leather notebook. Clara grew worried. "Mom, you should lie down." Agnes shook her head. "It's all right. This isn't work, it's a farewell." She opened the notebook and wrote slowly, her hand trembling slightly. "To those I love, if one day I'm no longer here, don't cry because I'm gone. Smile because I lived. The Rowland Foundation doesn't exist to remember my name, but to remind people that kindness still has a place in this world." Closing the notebook, she handed it to Noah. "Keep this. Whenever you feel lost, read it again, and you'll find your way." His eyes glistened. "I promise, Grandma." That evening, Clara read beside her mother's bed. "Mom, Noah wants to take you to Lake Franklin tomorrow, where Dad used to take us camping. Will you come?" Agnes nodded softly. "Of course. I want to see the lake one more time." She paused, taking her daughter's hand. "Clara, I'm proud of you. You stood up right where you once fell." Clara's voice broke. "Without you, I wouldn't know where to go." Agnes smiled, her eyes warm and calm. "You're the reason I made it to the end of this road." Late that night, rain tapped gently on the roof. Noah woke to see a dim light from his grandmother's room. He walked in and found her awake, eyes turned toward the window. "Can't sleep, Grandma, no," she whispered. "I was just thinking about your grandfather, but I don't feel lonely anymore. I think I'll see him soon." Noah's voice trembled. "Don't say that." Agnes smiled softly, her voice light as breath. "Don't be afraid. I'm just crossing to the other side of the garden." He took her hand tightly. "I love you, Grandma. I love you too, Noah. You are the best thing I ever did right." Outside, distant thunder rolled once before fading away. The rain stopped. Agnes closed her eyes, her face peaceful as if drifting into sleep. Moments later, Clara entered to adjust her blanket, not realizing that her mother had already gone quietly like the wind. Outside, the lavender still bloomed, its fragrance filling the air. Moonlight spilled through the window where Agnes once sat writing. Inside the little house, the warmth lingered as though she had never truly left. The legacy of Agnes Roland was more than wealth. It was faith, love, and the power of forgiveness, a light that would continue to live on in the hearts of those she left behind. The next morning, soft sunlight filled the wooden house. There were no more footsteps of Agnes, no gentle morning voice greeting the day, yet the scent of lavender lingered everywhere as if she had never left. Clara sat on the front steps holding an old photograph of her parents, smiling in front of their small diner long ago. Noah came out placing a freshly picked bouquet of purple lavender on the table. "Mom, I think Grandma would want the flowers changed every morning." Clara nodded, her voice trembling. "Every time I smell this scent, it feels like she's still here." They sat in silence as the spring wind swept through the porch, carrying a few lavender petals into the sky. That afternoon, Agnes's funeral was held simply, just as she had wished. There were no lavish wreaths, no wailing cries, only the presence of those who truly cared. The garden around the grave was covered in violet blooms, the sky clear and the sunlight warm as if the earth itself wanted to smile at her one last time. Clara stepped up to the casket, her hands trembling as she placed the old brown leather notebook on top, the one that held her mother's final words. "Mom, I promise to live as you wished. This foundation will always serve those in need, and no one will ever use it for greed." Noah stood beside her, his eyes red. "Grandma, I'll take the foundation beyond America. I want your name to be known everywhere." When the casket was lowered into the ground, a sudden gust of wind lifted a single lavender blossom high into the air. Clara watched it rise, tears falling as she smiled softly. Mom's finally where she wanted to be. That night, the house was silent. Clara sat at her mother's old desk and opened the last remaining notebook. On the final page beneath the message to Noah was a small folded piece of paper. She opened it and read her mother's delicate handwriting. "If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. But don't be afraid. I'm still here in every good deed you do and every person you help. When you feel tired, go to the garden, breathe in the lavender, and remember that kindness always wins." Clara wept, her tears falling onto the page. "Mom, I understand now." The next morning, Noah walked along the shore of Lake Franklin, the place his grandmother had longed to see again. The wind was cool, the water still as glass. He scattered a handful of lavender ashes into the lake. "Grandma, I'll carry this fragrance wherever the foundation goes, to every place that needs it." In the months that followed, Clara devoted herself entirely to her work. She expanded the scholarship program and opened the first international office in Toronto. Every sign bore the inscription, "Inspired by Agnes Roland," for those who choose kindness. At the opening ceremony, Clara spoke to the crowd. "Someone once asked why I named the foundation after my mother. The answer is simple, because she taught me that giving doesn't mean losing it, means keeping the best part of who we are." The applause was long and warm. From the front row, Noah watched his mother, once fragile, now strong and steady, just like his grandmother had been. After the event, they drove back to Vermont. As they approached the old hill, Clara stopped the car and looked out over the lavender fields, glowing in the afternoon sun. "Noah," she said softly, "it's time to tell her story." "The story of greed and grace?" he asked. "No," she replied, "the story of how love saved a family." That night, Clara opened her laptop and began to write. "The day my mother left, I finally understood what legacy truly means." She wrote through the night without stopping until dawn broke. When she finished, she titled the manuscript "The Last Lavender Bloom" and added a dedication beneath it. "For the one who taught me that forgiveness is the greatest form of courage." A year later, the book was published, touching thousands of hearts. In her final interview, Clara simply said, "I don't want people to remember my mother for what she owned, but for how she lived." The article ended with a photograph of the Rowland Garden lavender in full bloom surrounding a modest grave, the headstone engraved with simple words, "Agnes Rowland." She believed that kindness never loses its worth. A soft spring breeze passed through carrying the faint fragrance of lavender, and somewhere among the trembling purple petals, it was as if one could still hear her gentle voice whispering, "Live kindly, and you will never be poor." A year had passed since Agnes Rowland's passing, yet Vermont bloomed once more beneath the summer sun. The lavender fields before the old Rowland home shimmered in soft purple hues, their fragrance drifting gently through the air. The wooden house stood as she had left it, warm, tidy, and filled with her memory. Every corner whispered her presence. Clara opened the window, letting the breeze carry in the scent of lavender. On the table lay The Last Lavender Bloom, now in its third, printing its cover showing Agnes's hand resting gently on a lavender stem. Noah entered with 2 cups of coffee. Mom, the newspaper, wrote about the foundation again. They called it The Legacy of Kindness. Clara smiled. If Grandma could hear that, she'd probably say journalists love to exaggerate. They both laughed, but beneath the laughter was a quiet pride, the kind that grows from loss when love becomes memory. That afternoon, they attended a ceremony at the University of Vermont, honoring the Rowland Foundation. Hundreds of students and alumni filled the hall, people whose lives had been changed by Agnes's work. When her name was announced, the audience stood in applause. On the large screen appeared a photograph of Agnes, smiling in her lavender garden beneath the words, "Kindness is the only wealth that grows when you share it." Clara stepped to the podium. Her voice trembled, then steadied. "My mother once told me, never let wealth make you forget how to love. She didn't leave us money or luxury, but she left something greater, a light that never fades." The room fell silent, then erupted in applause. From his seat, Noah saw in his mother's eyes the same calm strength that had once lived in his grandmother's, a quiet fire that endures through love. That evening, Clara brewed tea and set 2 cups on the table, one for herself, one for her mother. It was a ritual she had never abandoned. "Noah," she said softly, "every time I make tea, I feel like she's still here." Noah nodded. Maybe she never really left. Maybe she just moved to a quieter place. They sat in silence, listening to the hum of crickets. The moon rose over the lavender fields, casting silver light across the blossoms. Clara whispered, "She told me when you feel lost, go to the garden and breathe the lavender. It will remind you why you began." "Do you want to go there?" Noah asked. She nodded. Together they stepped onto the porch and sat on Agnes's old wicker chair. The wind stirred, carrying the scent of lavender. Clara looked out over the garden. "There was a time I lost my way," she said softly, "but she spent her life guiding me back." Noah took her hand. "Now it's your turn to guide me." Clara smiled. "You already know the way. That's what she wanted, for us to find it ourselves." The next week, a letter arrived from Canada. The international branch of the Rowland Foundation had opened, offering scholarships to children in remote areas. Clara's eyes glistened. She's gone further than she ever dreamed. Noah smiled. "Not just her mom. You too." At the opening ceremony, the host quoted Agnes's final words, "Money should never be the goal. It is only a tool that reveals who we are." The hall grew quiet. Clara bowed her head, tears falling as a peaceful smile spread across her face. Returning to Vermont, she wrote a new epilogue for her book. A year after my mother's passing, her foundation has helped hundreds of students and families. But her greatest legacy isn't in numbers, it's in the belief that one person through kindness alone can change a generation. That night, rain fell softly. Clara wrote by the window while Noah arranged photographs of Agnes on the wall. The house glowed with lamplight, warm and calm. When Clara closed her notebook, she whispered, "Mom, I did it." Noah placed a hand on her shoulder. She'd be proud. Clara smiled faintly, looking at the lavender shining under the rain. No. She said she'd just say, "That's enough, Clara. Keep going." Outside, the rain stopped, and the moon appeared behind the clouds. Dew shimmered on the blossoms, turning the field into a sea of light. Clara opened the door and breathed in the cool night air. "Noah," she said, "do you hear that?" He listened. It was only the whisper of wind, but in it was something familiar, like the sound of her laughter, her gentle voice saying, "I'm still here." Clara smiled through her tears. Maybe that's what legacy truly means, not to be kept, but to be continued. She closed the door gently. On the table, the tea was still warm, a faint curl of steam rising into the air. The scent of lavender lingered, a fragrance of kindness, forgiveness, and of a mother who never truly left.